Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 786 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are coming to you on Sunday, January 11th. Duke is 15-1, 4-0 in the ACC after an 82-75 win over the SMU Mustangs. We are here to recap all of it. It was a wild, perplexing game, as my man Scott Rich, who is here with me. Scott, hello. I'm Donald, by the way. That's Scott.
Yep, no, I'm glad we reminded everyone who you are. Hopefully they know at this point. But yeah,
Hopefully,
yeah,
hopefully.
but no, perplexing was the key word as I was texting you and Jason, after the game. This was a, you know, horrible start, then a really dominant stretch, then a why can't this team put a team away game, where it
Mhm.
simultaneously felt like a game we could have lost and a game that we should have won by 20. And I think, like a lot of Duke fans, I'm very confused as to what, if anything, to take away from that performance.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the good. It's funny. There's a lot of stuff that belong in both the good and bad, and we'll talk about all of that. But some superlatives before we get into the headlines and everything. As I mentioned, this game, 82-75 win over SMU. It was without Boopy Miller. Boopy Miller made the trip to Durham, but developed flu-like symptoms, I guess, a couple days before the game, and did not leave the hotel. So he was not there at this game. So there was that part of the angle of this game. They honored the 2001 national championship team. Almost everybody was there except for Nate James, who's coaching as assistant coach at Howard. I believe Andre Sweet was not there, and like maybe one other person, I think JD Simpson or Ryan Callback. One of those two were not there. But it was a great sight to see those guys come back to Cameron. Jay Will was on the broadcast. They had Shane Battier on the broadcast. So it was a nice little deal where you kind of had that. With the overlay of this particular game, which was a top 25 matchup. It's funny. This was the first time that John Shire had coached against SMU. If you recall, last year when we went to Dallas, he was sick. It did not make that trip, and Chris Carrawell led the team in the absence. That was a Chris Carrawell win for Duke. This win, it's the sixth quad one win that Duke has.
Seventh,
Tops.
seventh
No,
now.
it's six. It's six and
Texas,
one. We've
Texas
had
is now in the top 50 after beating Alabama last night. It's now
yes.
up to seven.
That's right. That's right. Because it's a neutral site, so 50 works. So yes, number seven, tops in the D1. This my notes were done before Texas won, so thank you for that. And also, here's an interesting stat. I think everyone's aware of this stat. It's the 549th consecutive game at Cameron Indoor Stadium that was sold out. The last time we did not have a sellout at home was in November 1990. But yesterday's win marked the 500th victory during this sellout streak. So we moved during this 549 consecutive game sellout streak. We are now 549 at Cameron. Fortress Cameron is, and this is no exception. And we needed Cameron. The crazies were back. It was a little bit, we got a little bit more of the energy that was needed to close out this game. We begin with the headlines, and I have a few of them that I want to go through. First of all, from Dave Jordan. Dave Jordan writes, "Sharp shooting Stallions stymied by Boozer Brothers bombs." We'll talk about the Boozer Brothers. I thought they had a very great game. John Grantland, who always writes in, wrote, "Blazing Saddles. Devils rope, ride, and eventually break the gritty Mustangs, and great home win for Duke and the 2001 champs." Again, great to see those guys back on campus and in Cameron. Jim Baumgartner wrote, "Mustangs managed making Duke's win modest." We'll talk about how good they played in spite of not having Boopy on the floor. And then finally, Bill Wheeler wrote, "The Mustangs bucked, yet Duke rode it out to the buzzer." Scott, your thoughts on the headlines?
I, I think the headlines are a perfect encapsulation of moderate enthusiasm of this victory, which I think most Duke fans are probably feeling this morning.
And how all over the place we can go with these good and these bad, right? There were so many different things, elements that affected this game. Let's get into the good stuff. And I mentioned off the top that there's going to be some stuff that's in the good and the bad. One of those things is defense, because there were parts of the defense that was very good. Duke forced 21 turnovers in this game, 14 of them in the first half. They got three shot clock violations on SMU. Two of those came in the first half. And after the slow start that Duke had, it was again not a blitz to get back to square and to take the lead, but yet another one of those slow burns. And it was led in my mind by Dame Sar just decided that he was just going to be a thief and pick everybody's pocket. It felt like every possession he had his hand in the passing lane. He was, all over the floor trying to get loose balls. He was making great decisions on defense. And Scott, I think that was when we had the slow start. If we go back just a second, the starting lineup changed quite considerably. We had Caleb Foster, Isaiah Evans, Dame Sarr, Malik Brown, and Cam Boozer all in the starting lineup. And it felt like Dame, after the slow start, know that his defense was necessary to pick things back up, at least on his end. And he was able to, again, really make an impact on the defensive end, especially in the first half.
Yeah, the shift to the starting lineup was, I would say, a mixed bag. I think that it worked in the sense that Dame played one of his better games in the Duke uniform, and it all started on the defensive end. I think, that there was that period of 2, 3 minutes midway through the first half where he was a single-handed menace. He was making individual effort plays on defense that really did lead to us generating a lead after being down, 11-0 to start the game. Malik Brown, yeah, I thought that move didn't work. And Malik's side, I think this was not really a Malik Brown game. He's not built, his strengths don't match with guarding a 7'2", 270 center. So it was a little bit of I think Pat Gongba got the message by getting put on the bench, and I think that ended up working, and that was definitely one of the good. But Malik picked up 2 fouls right away. That sort of put us in a little bit of a hole that didn't work out quite as well. When we talk about the defense, I think that everyone is focusing on the field goal percentage. Everyone is focusing on the fact that this SMU team shot 56% from the floor. I think that's a bit of a misleading stat. I think that is skewed a lot by Jaden Toombs having the best game of his young career. He shot 10 for 12, a guy who we barely mentioned in the pregame because we talked so much about how this SMU team relies on its 5 starters. Toombs is the nominal 6th man. He only got those minutes because Boopy Miller was out, and he took advantage of them. But you look at what he was doing. Jaden Toombs was making tough contested mid-range shots. Jaden Toombs was taking hard shots and making them. And I think when John Shire goes back and looks at the game film, he's going to realize, yeah, those are shots that we're okay with their 6th man taking. And if he makes them, okay. You look at SMU's shot chart, we talked about in the pregame how they are prone to the mid-range jumper.
The true mid-range, like the old school mid-range.
Exactly. And that panned out in this game where this was not a poor defensive performance, the opposing team shoots 50% from the field because they're dunking it all over us and they're taking wide open threes. SMU was taking and making hard contested shots throughout the game. Sometimes that happens. This defensive effort on film, I think, is night and day from the defensive effort from our last 4 or 5 games where we were really wringing our hands. These weren't open threes. There weren't these sort of missed assignments on defense. Teams weren't annihilating us going to the rim. SMU, just give them credit. They made a lot of really good shots. And so I think this is a defensive performance that will look better on tape than it does in the box score. The last thing I'll say on this point is if you take all those turnovers, if you say that each of those turnovers is a missed shot, then all of a sudden I'm making up a new advanced stat. Turnover plus field goal percentage goes down to 40%, right? Mm-hmm. Duke will take a defensive performance where a really good offensive team shoots 40% from the field. If you count each of those turnovers as a missed field goal, that's where things go down to. So again, I thought this was a net step forward for this team defensively, even though the box score may not show it.
I mean, they had 30 field goals and 21 turnovers. So it was almost 70% of possessions ended. Or I'm sorry, you know the number, you know what I'm trying to get to, but there's a huge percentage of possessions that ended in turnovers. And they held SMU to just 10 assists. They were playing a lot of hero ball, like you mentioned, a lot of off the dribble, just trying to create a shot and go. And again, we'll talk about the defense on the bad part and where they can improve. But I thought overall, like the turnover side of things, they were really that's how we got back in the game was forcing turnovers led by Dame Sar. I want to go back to the starting lineup because John Shire after the press conference mentioned the fact that he had, done this shift and the guys who started on the bench that had been in the starting lineup the last few games, at least in part of one guy, was Caden Boozer and Pat Gongba. John Shire, before he got to questions, he was almost done with his intro, and he said, "I want to, before you guys get to questions, I want to single out Caden Boozer and Pat Gongba for their efforts. They both led the team in plus minus. He said Caden steadied the team when he was in the game. Brought a lot of poise. Pat has a career high in points, and he mentioned the great response and the great attitude that they got after not getting the start, which is not always something that players do, right? Some players take the motion and they don't, they don't have that kind of attitude. But for them, they used it as kind of a fire to get back in the game. Again, both of them having great games, and they off the bench is the reason why we had 34 bench points. But those guys coming off the bench and providing that spark. Pat with 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 1 assist. Caden with 12 points, 2 or 3 from beyond the arc, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, and 2 steals. These guys were really inserting themselves both on offense and then even again on defense, just trying to steady the ship and make it where we were able to do our thing.
And just to give people some context, it is not always a given that players respond to benching the way that
Mm-hmm.
Caden Boozer and Pat Kongba did. Just as an anecdote, when I was on campus writing for the Chronicle, I was there for Austin Rivers' year. I covered for the Chronicle Austin Rivers one game where he came off the bench against Wake Forest after he had a couple really bad games, and Coach K tried to send him a message. In the locker room, everyone's around Austin Rivers. Everyone asked the question, okay, well, what did this send to you? His response, it didn't really send much of a message. I know I'm a starter. I'll be a starter moving forward. And he just returned, and Austin Rivers was Austin Rivers for good and bad. That's not what happened today. I think Caden Boozer played his most complete game as a Blue Devil. I think his defense was much, much improved today, yesterday, excuse me, relative to what we've been seeing. I think a little bit of that was he didn't have to guard Boopy Miller. Everything's a little bit nicer when you're not guarding Boopy Miller, but he was playing better defensively. He was communicating better. He wasn't getting blown by and attacked the way we've seen in the past. And that's what allowed him to stay on the floor to have the offensive impact he had. He was on the floor for the second most amount of time. Only his brother was on the floor for 30 more seconds. So this was a Caden Boozer game. And again, you don't play 34 minutes in the Duke uniform if you're a defensive liability. There have been questions this year, is Caden Boozer a defensive liability? He certainly wasn't last night. And again, he can't have the offensive impact he had on that game if he's not backing that up on the defensive end of the floor as well. On Pat, the thing with Pat was he was attacking the paint. Finally, Pat Gongba played like big Pat, not stretch five Pat. And he took a couple of threes. They were wide open. I'm fine if they're not, if he wants to take an Ali Khalifa, they're not even guarding me three. I'm fine with that. We've seen Pat make that. But afterwards, he wasn't sticking around up there. He finally realized, I've got some advantage. He attacked the paint. We got him some isolated post ups. And rather than looking to pass, Pat looked to go to the rim. Even though he was getting guarded by someone with size, Pat had the footwork to get around Samit Iqbal, and he did that multiple times. This was a really positive sign from Pat as well, in that he was aggressive offensively, looking for his shot, and not looking for shots, anywhere, but his shots as Big Pat in the paint, using his post moves, using the feet that we know he has, but we haven't seen for a few games.
And for Pat, the fact that he is a danger with the ball on the passing end as well, right? Like we've seen him have games where he has 3, 4, sometimes even 5 assists. This time around, he only had 1 assist, but it was a banger, right? It was that alley oop to Malik Brown. And you could see, the defense kind of be like, okay, well, we can't let him pass anymore because that'll happen. So he used his footwork to his advantage. I thought he did excellent. One thing, shifting gears, one thing that Duke did, I thought that was great was they were, SMU, I mentioned they held SMU to just 10 assists on 30 field goals, and it was even less than the first half. On the other side, we were scoring everything via the pass. We had 18 assists and 25 made shots, 72%, which is, as if you've been following the show for a while, we call that excellent. We love assist rates over 70%. And again, it was guys making the extra pass, making the smart pass, but also something that we haven't really done consistently over the last few games, guys knowing when to not make that final pass and just shoot the ball, right? Like being in the corner and just saying, okay, well, I'm open. I'm not going to try and make another pass to show that I'm unselfish. They pass me the ball because I'm in the corner and there's nobody within 20 feet of me. Shoot the ball. That sort of thing where you have that kind of wherewithal to get to the right spot, but also they were taking advantage of, I have the ball in a position where I can make this basket. I'm going to go ahead and make this basket.
You know, a lot of those assists were from the usual suspects. The Boozer brothers both had 4 assists. The unusual suspect, who I think we also need to mention, is Nick Kamenia. Nick
Mm-hmm.
had 4 assists in 15 minutes. He had 5 points off the bench. He looked more like himself. He looked like the Nick Kamenia who was in the starting lineup for that stretch. I think for the first time in a few weeks, if that ankle really has been bothering him, this was the first sign that he might be over that hump. And he's a guy who we need on this team moving forward. I thought that he finally embraced the potential we saw in the scrimmages where he was almost operating like a de facto point guard when he was in the starting lineup before Dame got back from his early season injury. He was facilitating, he was attacking and kicking, and when you're attacking and kicking with a 6'7", 6'8" frame, that's something that's really hard to contend with on a defensive side. That was really encouraging for me. I think that Nick Kamenia as the offensive spark off the bench is going to be a big factor for this Duke team because we love Malik Brown, we love Dame Sarr, but those are defense first guys. If someone on this team is going to be the offensive spark plug off the bench that we need, if hey, it's a slow start and it's a slow offensive start, not a slow defensive start, we need Nick Kamenia to be able to come in and be that spark plug and that creator, and he did that yesterday.
I mean, look, I've said it on the show before. I think one of the most important players in NBA history was Vinnie Johnson, the microwave, because he taught everybody that, hey,
Who,
you
who do
don't
you
have
play
to.
for? Who do you play for?
He played for our Detroit Pistons is what he played
Oh,
for, and he's a champion. But I think again, you need somebody to have that spark off the bench where when they come in, the other team and everyone on the floor goes, okay, cool, we're about to get some production out of this guy very quickly, and you have to be able to embrace that role. It's not an easy role to have, knowing that you are going to get X amount of minutes a game to go in, and when you are, you basically have to be on the go all the time. If we can get that consistently from our bench, it would be great. And it shouldn't be because starters are not starting, right? If that makes sense. Like it's got to be our bench production needs to be our bench production, whether they're in the game as a starter or or coming off the bench in their normal role. Let's talk about two guys that probably should have, we probably should have waited a little bit longer. Or I'm sorry, a little bit not as long to get to them. Cam Boozer, Slim Evans. Yeah, y'all did good. 18 points for Cam, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. Isaiah Evans had some crucial threes. 21 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist for him. But his he was instrumental early in getting us back from that 11-0 deficit that we started the game with. He was instrumental in closing out the game, both by hitting threes and making free throws. We shot 77% from the line, also, so I want to point that out as well. But those two guys again, so steadfast, and we know that those are production. And for the second time this week, Isaiah Evans outpoints Cam Boozer in the department. So if we're looking for a second scorer, great. I think we found him. It's just a matter of whether on a daily basis is going to be Slim or if it's going to be Cam. But I like the fact that we had 3 guys in double figures, if you include Pat. 3 guys that were, I mean, one over 20 and 2 close to 20, and they were really. And it felt like at certain points of the game that when they got the ball, SMU might as well just run down to the other end of the floor because they weren't going to stop them.
I'm going to hold off on Cam for reasons that will become clear in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
For Isaiah, though, I just want to, after his, essential no-show against Texas Tech, his last 4 games, 17 against Georgia Tech, 28 against FSU, shooting 42% from three, 23 against Louisville, shooting 40% from three, and 21 yesterday against SMU, shooting 50% from three. That's the Isaiah Evans that we were expecting this year. That's the Isaiah Evans that is this team's second option. That 4 game stretch, especially after in the response to Duke's loss in one of his worst games in a Duke uniform, that's got to be extremely, extremely encouraging. If Isaiah Evans is shooting 40% from three, this is a different Duke team. And he's not just, again, and we've talked about this evolving throughout the year. Again, yesterday, he wasn't just a spot up shooter. He was someone who was, once he made a few threes, once teams were cheating on him on those flare screens. He loves those flare screens, but he's developed a counter move. He's developed a, oh, they're cheating off me on the flare screens. They're over helping. They're over pursuing. I'm gonna just immediately put the ball on the floor and get it into the paint off of that. And a lot of times he was doing that to actually facilitate rather than doing that just to put up a floater, doing that to attack the rim. He still has to improve finishing at the rim. I think we all know that. I liked how against SMU, he was attacking, he was getting 2 feet in the paint, but then he was making that pass out and leading to that ball rotation. So again, rather than put up an okay shot off of a flare screen that was contested, he was leading the offense and getting the ball rotation started to get to a better shot off of that.
Isaiah Evans is like a starting pitcher who has an incredible fastball, but like midway through the season, you realize, oh no, he's developed another pitch, right? He's got that curveball now, and he's using it and he's utilizing it when something either is not working or they've caught on to it. And like you said, there was a point where I think he was 4 for 10 from three, and he was 4 for 8, excuse me, from three. And once again, Duke is undefeated when he hits more than 3 threes in a game. So keep feeding him the rock. But also, it makes sense when he's making those shots because it just draws the defense out that much more. And for him, he knows he can blow past almost anybody in college basketball. And when he's in the lane, he's always in that position where he can do 3 things to the ball. He can dribble to the hole, he can shoot pop up like for a 15-footer, or he can pass if the defense presents itself out to somebody on the wing who then shoots the 3. Or at least, like you said, moves the ball around and gets to a even better shot. I like what I'm seeing from him. I hate that he was sick against Texas Tech, and that's the reason for his resurgence. I don't need him to get sick again for this to happen, but I like the fact that he spent 10 days essentially getting better, but also hearing about how that was one of his worst games. And he said, well, I'm not going to do that again, and kind of filed that away in memory and learned from it, and has really developed a second part of his game that is just as lethal as his best part of his game.
Last thing for the good I'll mention is Summit Igatulu, 7'2", 270, huge guy. I think, there were some questions. Hey, how do Cam Boozer and Pat Ngongba, match up against huge, extraordinary size? They did pretty darn good. They limited Igatulu to 6 points. He was 3 of 6 from the floor. He only had 6 rebounds. He was not the dominating force in this game that I think the best form of the SMU Mustangs is when they really have a 7'2" guy who's dominating the paint to be the counterattack to all of their perimeter weapons. Defensively, there were a lot of problems defensively, a lot of things to improve on. I don't think down low in the paint against their center was one of those issues. I think both Pat and Cam, and to a lesser extent Malik more in the second half than the first, deserve a lot of flowers for not letting that 7'2" guy really be a dominating force in this game.
I do want to talk about the defense, but we're going to shift to the rest of our recap of the SMU game. But first, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the stuff to improve. We'll give out player of the week and play of the game options. And we're going to talk GPA. Our Duke guys are getting it done on the court and in the classroom. We'll talk about it in a minute.
All right, folks. New year, bigger goals. No time to cook? Factor makes it easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs, so you can eat well without the shopping or the cooking.
Factor meals are always fresh and never frozen meals that are ready in about 2 minutes. No prep, no stress. With over 100 rotating weekly meals, including options Like high protein, calorie smart, or even a Mediterranean diet, there's something for everyone to enjoy. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery, and they're delicious, which is the most important part.
Yes, it is, Donald. Hey, folks, head to factormeals.com/DukeBB50 off. Again, use that code DukeBB50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That offer is only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Make healthy eating easier with Factor.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
All right, we are back, and we are continuing our recap of the SMU win, again, 82-75, the final score from Cameron Indoor Stadium yesterday. Donald and Scott here. We're going to talk about the things to improve in this game. And when we talk about the defense, I want to start with this. It's not necessarily the shooting percentage, which, again, SMU shot very well when they did take shots, right? We were turning the ball over quite a bit, but when they did get a shot, they were doing well at them. I think the game encapsulates itself into the perplexing part that you mentioned in the second half. When we got the lead, it felt like we got complacent and lethargic, and our defense just kind of let SMU make it a game. I mean, we had a point where we were up, 12, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're only up 4. And it just, again, it felt like SMU was just not really doing anything terribly. They're just like, hey, I'm just going to shoot the ball, and it's going to keep going in, and Duke is just going to be complacent and let us shoot these shots, and we're going to hit 59% of them from 2, and we're just going to keep doing this until maybe they figure this out. And it just felt like we knew we had the lead. We knew we had a chance to put them away. It just didn't feel like we wanted to do it. And I just want to point out a couple of things from post-game notes. Isaiah Evans mentioned the 2001 national champions being there. They were honored at halftime. And he mentioned that nobody wants to lose in front of them. And they did what we're trying to do, win a national championship. And so we were trying to impress them a little bit. Well, they weren't really impressing them in the second half. I'm sure in the first half there was a lot to be said about the defense, but in the second half, it just felt like they didn't put the game away when they had a chance to.
If you watch John Shire's press conference after the fact, I think, I love how transparent John Shire is. It's certainly night and day compared to Coach K, who wouldn't say, anything. He would say nothing in 100 words in a press conference. John Shire tells you how he's feeling. And John Shire was just as perturbed with some of these things as we all are. And one of the things he said in that press conference that stuck out to me is he said, this team doesn't know how to deal with inflection points yet. This team doesn't know how to, and now I'm sort of paraphrasing, this team doesn't know how to take a 10-point lead and make it 15. This team doesn't know how to make that stop at the end of the first half so we go in up 9 instead of up 6. And those are the things that are holding this team back from feeling like a 15-1 team, right? I think that's the frustration, is that this team is 15-1, but somehow it doesn't feel like it, right? And I think that's because there are all these things we expect of a dominant Duke team that this group isn't doing. And one of those things is putting teams away. Getting up 12 at home in Cameron against a team missing their best player, turn that to 20, get Cameron going nuts, make SMU call that timeout when Cameron is so loud you can't think. That didn't happen yesterday. And it felt like it should. It felt like the momentum was going our way. It felt like we had turned a corner. But that last switch wasn't getting flipped. And there are a lot of potential reasons as to why that's happening. I think John Shire is, very aware of that and trying to figure that out. Part of that is the slow starts as well. When you're playing from down 11 to start, you're always in a little bit of a hole. And that even when you tie it up after, 4 or 5 minutes, that is something that sticks with you the rest of that game. That is the biggest, large scale point of concern for me. When is this team going to put teams away? When is this team going to win games comfortably that they've played like a team that is the dominant, better team for a vast majority of the contest?
Cam Boozer also said after the game, he said, quote, when we get leads and we get kind of comfortable, and we've got to find a way to figure that out. We've got to figure out what we do when we get leads because we're not handling it well right now, end quote. And it's not even for me. Yes, I'm me. I'm the fan of the blowouts. I would love to beat every team by 40. I don't care about close games and how what they may do to help you learn. We're getting a lot of them this year because we're not figuring out how to handle leads. And even if it's holding guys at arm's length, there's several games where you kind of go, hey, we're up 10. By the next TV timeout, we should be up 10. And at the TV timeout after that, if we're up 10, like if they're doing all they can to get back in this game and we're just saying, nope, game's done. That's fine when you're kind of controlling the pace. But in the second half, when you get comfortable, you lose control of that tempo and that pace. And that's when SMU started hit. I mean, it's not even they started it, but like they got into a little phase where they were hitting everything. And again, like you said, some very difficult shots that they were hitting. And you could sit there and go, okay, well, that's fine. They can hit that shot. They're not going to do that the rest of the game, but they did. And also it's like, oh, you can do that when you're up 30. And okay, they have a little run that cut it to 22. But when you're up only 12 and all of a sudden they hit a shot here, a shot there, okay, all of a sudden it's a 4-point game, and you're looking up, you go, okay, now we got to get back into this groove that we had before. They haven't figured out how to hold teams off, and as you mentioned, also put them away.
It's interesting that Cam was the one who said that in the post game, because I think a lot of that does actually fall on his shoulders. And it's rare that we've talked about Cam Boozer in the bad section of this podcast. But I want to mention something that I think just sticks out like a sore thumb in the box score.
I think I know what you're about to say. Go ahead.
The entire game yesterday, Cam Boozer attempted 5 2-point field goals. Cameron Boozer, the bully, the National Player of the Year, who can get whatever he wants in the paint, took 5 2-point field goals the entire game. Yes, he got to the line. He shot 7 free throws, so he was attacking in that way. But that's settling. And if Cam Boozer is the alpha of this team, putting teams away falls on his shoulders. When Duke's up 10, Cam Boozer should be saying, give me the MFing ball. I have a matchup, and I'm going to take him one-on-one, and I'm going to make that play that's going to send Cameron into a tizzy. It is not okay for the best player in the country to be taking just 5 2-point field goals. He shot well from beyond the arc. He was 2 for 4. His shooting from deep has been great. But he is settling too much for being that perimeter pick and pop big rather than being the dominant force that is Duke's put away tool when we need him to be. That's something that I think when this team goes into the film session, they're going to say, Cam, we needed you here. We needed you to take on the offensive load and put this team away.
I think also, and again, yeah, like you said, it's very rarely we talk about Cam in the bad because he does so many things that are good. The one place where he has room to improve is taking care of the basketball. I mean, he had 4 turnovers yesterday. He had 4 against Louisville. That's 8 all week. And it's not, again, it's because he gets the ball a lot. Right. So you have a lot of, in my mind, you go, if you have the ball 40 times, that's 40 opportunities for you to score, but it's also 40 opportunities for you to lose the basketball or do something, careless with the basketball. And he's, again, 90% of the time, he's great. It's just those other times where it felt like there were opportune moments, like you said, for us to really assume control of the game. The ball's in his hands and it's not taking care of it. Again, getting comfortable with the lead means more than just, okay, we're up 6, let's just hang on. We want to be in a position where we're always making it where the other team has to expend all of their energy to try and catch up. And when they don't, and they're gassed, that's when you go, okay, now it's time. And we haven't developed that yet. And it's also, again, credit to SMU. They fought hard. They fought like warriors to get back into this game after having that lead to start. And it wasn't just us letting them back into the game. They took that opportunity, like you mentioned earlier. And so I think all these teams that we face in the ACC are going to have that same mentality of, okay, even if Duke's going to go down early, they're going to go on one of their Duke runs, they're going to catch up, and then they're going to take the lead, and then there's going to be a moment where they have spent so much energy trying to catch up that there's going to be a lull in their play, and we can take advantage of that. That's going to be part of the scouting plan. And there may be teams who, kind of like in football, right? When you want to leave some time on the clock, you just let the other team score the touchdown so that you can get the ball back quicker. Like, they're going to have these moments, and so we have to figure out how, when we get the lead, to have our best players be in the best positions, how to fight through the fatigue that naturally occurs. And if it's guys rotating in and out a little bit more, that's fine. But I think the guys off the bench need to come into the game also ready to control this game. And we're a young team with some old guys, but we just haven't figured out that balance yet. And teams are catching up because SMU, it kind of almost felt like they were waiting for that lull to strike. And again, it wasn't a quick blitz for them to get back into the game. But when you're only up 12, a couple shots here and there are the difference between us winning by 20 and winning by 7.
One last point on Cam before we move on. The thing that irked me the most about those 4 turnovers was not that they were not turnovers of attacking. They were turnovers of trying to pass up a great shot for a perfect shot. They were more often than not Cam having the ball in good position for himself, seeing a guy open for 3 sort of cross court, one of those sort of 50-50 passes. There are players that should make those 50-50 passes. There are players who should give up that good shot for the chance of the great shot. Cam Boozer's not one of those guys. If Cam Boozer's in position, Cam Boozer should be taking that shot, period, end of sentence. I think that is something that is a natural part of freshman progression. We saw that with Cooper Flagg a little bit last year too, right? Part of why his scoring average was on such an upward trajectory throughout the season was he started looking for himself a little bit more and facilitating a little bit less. Lest we forget, it's only January 10th, or yesterday was January 10th. It's still relatively early in the season. There's still plenty of time for Cam to adjust to that element of the college game. But if he's turning the ball over, attacking the hoop, and making a good post move, I'm okay with that. If he's turning the ball over, kicking it out to a guy who's sort of covered, that's not okay in my book. Last, one of the other things we have to talk about in the bad, we have to at least mention Caleb Foster. We talked about how transcendent he was in the second half against Louisville. Something was off yesterday. There were people at the game who were sort of said that, saw him getting some work done on the bench. Maybe he had that same flu that Boopy Miller did and was trying to push through it. I don't think we'll know. That wasn't mentioned in any of the post-game availability I saw. But if you sort of ignore that element of things because we don't know for sure, what I saw from Caleb yesterday was the old Caleb Foster, who was trying to finish around contact rather than through contact. And there was a little bit in the second half where you saw the flashes. He started attacking the basket downhill again, and he got past his defender. He sort of put himself in the exact same position he was against Louisville, but he tried to do that little hook shot or, try to do a little fadeaway finish rather than stopping on 2 feet, waiting for the defender to go by and going up strong. That was the difference in the game against Louisville. It seemed like he sort of had a little bit of a brain fart, for lack of a better term, and reverted back into old Caleb Foster yesterday. Again, it sounds like maybe there are some extenuating circumstances that account for that, but the ceiling of this Duke team gets where we want it to be when Caleb Foster is the Louisville Caleb Foster, not the Caleb Foster we saw against SMU. Hopefully yesterday was a blip on the, in the general trajectory.
And when you mentioned that he might have been under the weather or whatever the situation may be, it it showed itself during the game when you look back at it in his shots because all the shots were short. Like, and not just the ones at the rim, but like his 3-pointers all hit front rim. It felt like he just was playing. I mean, he got 4 rebounds, but it just felt like he was playing on tired legs the whole time, which, again, coming off of the high of the Louisville game, you're thinking, okay, something has transpired between Wednesday night and Saturday afternoon that would cause him to have tired legs. And, maybe it's just one of those games where he was under the weather or what have you, and that was bothering him because that's where it manifested itself. And when you have tired legs, everything feels a step slower. Everything feels like you can't jump as high, so you try to go around it, which is why he wasn't going through contact. He was trying to work his way around it. Shots are falling just short. It felt like even on different plays, it just felt like he'd get to the corner, he'd grab the ball, and it was just a step too late. So that I have to dribble to the side, and now I'm not fully set for this three that I'm going to take. Oh yeah, and I still have these tired legs here. So it just felt like everything was just a step off for him, and hopefully it's just nothing more than he was feeling a little fluish or feeling under the weather, and he's back soon. But I mean, we're going to go on a long road trip, so hopefully it's not the flu, because would hate for him to miss that, because we definitely need the second half Louisville Caleb Foster against Cal and Stanford, because they're both playing very well. But yeah, it was weird after that game, especially that second half, for him to come back with a dud of 0 points. It didn't feel like the Caleb Foster we have seen so far this season.
And again, the weirdest thing to me that I think points to that, again, some sort of extenuating circumstance, was how prolonged the period he was on the bench in the first half. He came out in that first batch of subs when Caden came in, and I don't think he re-entered the game until, 5 or so minutes left in the first half. That's not something that John Shire really ever does, give his players 15 minutes of rest on the bench. The other thing that was, hey, something's up for me, was even though the starting lineup didn't really work out all that well, John Shire still went with that starting lineup to start the second half, with the exception of Caden going in for Caleb. Dame still started, Malik still started. That to me says, okay, something at halftime was telling John Shire that Caleb just isn't right. Now, I give Caleb also a lot of credit. He was in the game down the stretch. He helped us close that game out, even though he wasn't producing offensively. At least down the stretch in the last 5 minutes, he was able to give us some really good necessary defense. He came up with a big offensive rebound that extended the possession and helped us run some more time off the clock. So it wasn't all bad for Caleb Foster. But again, there were enough of these that's odd substitution scenarios, that's odd shots, that hopefully this is a Caleb Foster was under the weather, not a Caleb Foster has regressed type of situation.
I mean, he only played 15 minutes, so that signals to me that health wise something was a little bit off, because even if he's having a bad game, he's still in there for 28 to 30 minutes. So the fact that he's only in there 15, probably that's where our answer lies right there. Let's get to our play of the game, and I'm going to go with a hustle play in the first half. 8:05.
I think we're on the same wavelength once again, sir.
I hope so. 8:05 left in the first half. First of all, on the other end, Malik Brown has an alley-oop dunk from Big Pat. It was Big Pat's only assist, and it was a great one because it was like all the way. It was like a high arcing, looked like a shot, but then you're like, oh no, that's not a shot. That's a pass. So they come down, and B.J. Edwards brings the ball up, and Dame Sarr is just all over him. Dame Sarr picks B.J. Edwards' pocket near midcourt. The ball goes loose. He dives basically 10 feet to his right to get the ball. He ends up with the ball and then is able to kind of move around onto his butt and pass the ball across court to Malik Brown, who had been streaking towards the basket. He catches the ball in the paint, essentially, goes in for the layup and gets the foul call. That play doesn't happen without Dame Sarr just being all over the place, hustling, and it was a clean pick. Like it was one of those call the cops, thief. We got a thief for the mist. Like he absolutely grabbed it. But the hustle play, it was one thing that he could have deflected the ball and then it's starting to roll out of bounds, and he just kind of goes, I still won this play. but he wanted to win the ball. And that was the kind of tenacity that was necessary at that moment.
The highlight was the hustle, but the most important element of that play to me was that Dame got the ball and calmly got it to Malik to attack. November Dame Sar throws that ball into the stands, trying to make that pass, rushing himself. That to me was a Dame Sar is evolving. The game is, slowing down, that phrase that we all love to overuse. That was a real, the game is slowing down for Dame Sar moment for me because he didn't rush it. He didn't, accidentally make a backcourt. I think he was sort of borderline whether he was in the front court or not on that play. He slowed himself down. He wasn't getting pressured. He surveyed and he found Malik. That was something that, again, the highlight was the hustle. The highlight was the defense. That's something that Dame Sar is the only player in college basketball who's going to make that play. But the fact that he finished the play by getting it to the right guy to attack the rim in a fast break, that to me is the evolution of Dame Sar that this Duke team needs to achieve its ceiling.
And it was in traffic. It wasn't like a straight pass. He kind of had to arc it over to SMU players to get it to Malik. So a great play all around by Dame Sar, and glad that we both agreed that was the play of the game. Let's move to our player of the week. Scott, I'm going to go to you first. Who do you have for player of the week?
God, the answer, 24 hours ago was an easy Caleb Foster because of how amazing he was against Louisville, but then we saw that dud. I think the answer is Isaiah Evans. I think that Isaiah Evans had back-to-back against ranked opponents, games of the first-round pick Isaiah Evans, the Robin to Cam Boozer's Batman Isaiah Evans that this Duke team needed. And if that's the Isaiah Evans we see for the next 3 months, we're going to be playing basketball for more than the next 3 months. That was something to me. Again, Cam Boozer dominates the stat sheet every darn week. Cam Boozer could win this award every darn week. But Isaiah Evans took a step forward this week, again, when Duke needed him in 2 back-to-back games against ranked opponents. Lest we forget, SMU is a ranked opponent. For all this hand-wringing we're doing, Duke beat a ranked opponent, got a quad 1 victory yesterday. I think that's something that, the fact that we're almost to the end of the podcast before we mention that is, goes to how spoiled we are as Duke fans right now. That this
We did mention at the top because it's their 7th one, but
exactly.
It remains to be, it stands to be repeated, right? It was a quad 1 game. Yes, they may have been missing Boopy Miller, but that's still a quad 1 team that we beat in Cameron yesterday.
Yeah, so I mean, again, for Isaiah to come up in the big games, these last 2 games, is what we need from Isaiah Evans. And I think if that continues, we're going to start seeing Cam Boozer start putting up those monster numbers, those 30-point games again, because Isaiah Evans' gravity is going to open things back up for Cam. I think that was a huge step forward for this Duke team.
Yeah, I mean, after I thought there was 3 players entering yesterday that were in contention. It was Cam Boozer, Isaiah Evans, and Caleb Foster. With Caleb Foster's performance yesterday, he was out. So if you could give it to Cam Evans or Isaiah Boozer, we could. We would. But
I'd love to have that player on the team. He sounds pretty good.
Don't get me hoping here. But I think in the end, I agree with you. Isaiah Evans with 44 points, 8 3-pointers on the week, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, one assist, and 1 block. I think honestly, the one thing that won in my mind over Cam Boozer is the turnovers. Slim had 2, Cam had 8. It's hard to when you're splitting hairs here, you just have to split the last hair, and that was the one that got in my mind Slim over the top. But a great week by both of them, and again, both of them instrumental in our comeback against Louisville, and then also holding off SMU yesterday. Okay, as we close out this, I did want to say some positive news about the basketball team. We here in the Duke Basketball Roundup, we love talking about athletics, but we also enjoy talking about academics as well. We like that when our teams do well on the court and in the classroom, and this men's basketball team is no exception to that. This fall, they announced their fall GPAs from the semester, and they're very, very good. As a team, the Duke men's basketball team had a 3.32 GPA average. 10 players had over a 3.0 GPA. The freshmen leading the way, 3.44 GPA for the freshmen. And in the John Shire era, when you include both the fall and spring semesters, Duke teams have an average of 3.25 GPA. So again, we a few years ago when we were talking about towards the end, towards the beginning of John Shire's era, there was like, hey, there were some guys that weren't taking care of business in the classroom, and we called out the team on it because that's part of the deal, right? I get NIL adds this other element to things, but they're still student athletes, and student still comes first. And really, really enjoy that they are also highlighting the fact that these guys are getting it done in the classroom as well. It sets themselves up for so many more things, even if they don't finish their college career or education at Duke. It sets them up for so many different things, and plus the brotherhood's going to set them up for life as well. So really, really proud to see that these guys are kicking ass in the classroom.
I love hearing that, and I'll say this, I've mentioned on the podcast, I'm now a professor at University of Connecticut. I know through the grapevine the type of classes that basketball players at other institutions take. Mm-hmm. Duke University does not offer those classes that players at other institutions like the University of Connecticut take. Duke basketball players are getting 3.0s at Duke freaking University. And that is something that should always, always, always be applauded. There's no asterisk. There's no what if. They are getting, a 3.0 from Duke University. Bravo, fellas.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no general studies at Duke, which a lot of schools have. And when you see the broadcast and they're like, oh, this guy is majoring in, general studies is usually number one in that area. We don't have that. And these guys are performing well in some great disciplines. So congratulations to the team. Keep it up. And hopefully the spring semester is just as good, if not better, than the fall semester. We're going to leave it here, but really quickly, I just want to note that this week, obviously, Duke takes his first West Coast trip to the other Atlantic coast. They're going to Cal and Stanford on the road. As we preview that game a little bit later this week, just want to let people know this one stat as we leave here. So far, it's been 18 months since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC. Only Wake Forest last year has gone over to the West Coast and come back 2-0. Every other team that has gone to the West Coast has lost one of these games. This is going to be a tough week for the Blue Devils. Don't get it twisted. Scott and I will be back to preview the Cal game, of course, first of all, later this week. But until then, this will conclude this episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. For Scott, I am Donald, and it's now time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us out.